Hey team, Luke at Crusader Machining here. Welcome back for another video. We are just going to hop right in. We've got this big swinging part here that we need to turn from rusty into shiny and beautiful. And in this video, we're going to go over it. We don't normally run a lot of large diameter stuff into our shop. That is large diameter, just under 8 inches overall length, just under 8 inches diameter. And we are turning it here complete in one operation. So let's dive in. We're going to go over work holding, fixturing, challenges to such a big part, going over some programming details, the how, the why, the what, and the where. So let's get started. Let's see how we turn this into something beautiful. So a lot of you folks out there might not think this is a big part. For us, it's a big part. To put it in perspective, another job I'm running this part here, and we even run them a lot smaller than that, so going from this tiny little thing, or on average I'd say 1 inch diameter, to this, for us, is a big part. How do you even handle them? So I'm not gonna lift this over and over all day to keep the machine loaded. Here we have our crane. Well, I call it a crane. It's a little hoist that we built. Bought this one from a local discount hardware store. We had this table that was gifted by someone by the name of James. What's up, Jim? And we mounted it to it. And this is what we use to hoist our parts. So this is the first step into what we do. As you can see here, wow, it's magic. And then I like to give it a little spin like that just for fun. Let's load it up. Before we load it in, I want to talk about our main side jaws, because obviously once we have our part in, we will not be able to see them. These are the main side jaws that we use. They are hard jaws with serrations here, and this is a little off topic, but it's cool. Right here you can see we spot drilled and tapped a hole on all 3 of them for what we call standoffs. We'll probably talk about that in a future video. But these are our jaws, our main side. Bring it to a reasonable height. We clamp them shut, and then we lower our crane arm. And I know it's not a crane, but it makes me feel cool saying that. We lower our crane arm to get the tension off, pull our strap out, and then I like to double check on the back of the jaws that it is seated flat, which it is on every 1, 2, 3 jaws. Now, let's keep going. So when we have parts like this, we load on the main, we machine it, transfer comes over and grabs it. As I stated before, it's a big part. Other complication is just this mass as it's spinning. If we're following the rules of surface footage and programming in SFM, which I highly advise that you do, using G96 to program versus G97. G96 is constant SFM. Herein lies the problem. The max speed on this machine is 5,000 RPM. You do not want to spin this slug up at 5,000 RPM. Now, could you and could it be okay? Sure. Would you ever want to take the chance? No, for obvious reasons. So when you're programming in G96 or constant SFM or constant surface speed, CSS, you need to have a G50. G50 being a spindle speed max or a spindle speed cap. That's what we have here at the beginning of our program, and it might actually even be at the beginning of each tool. Yeah, we've got a few different G50s in the program. I set my G50 at 1200 max RPM. And I know you're thinking, shucks, that's not fast at all. It's really not. But it's also not slow. When I'm doing my OD turning here, and you'll see as I'm looking at the program later, as I'm doing my turning, there's sometimes I'm at 300 RPM. Because if we know, constant surface speed does not relate a 1-to-1 ratio to RPM. The bigger the diameter, the slower the speed. The smaller the diameter, the faster the speed that your spindle moves. So I'm capped off at 1200 RPM, G50 S1200. Spindle speed cap at 1200. Another complication we have here is the wobble. This one's actually not wobbling that bad. In one of my shorts I made that I'll try to bloop up here, you can see it. When I bring my tool up to the top, I've got about 100 thousandths worth of wobble. I think it was like 125, basically an eighth worth of wobble. When you're running bar stock, or like here, you're holding on a turn diameter, the wobble really doesn't matter. But this is a little bit of precarious work holding, slightly precarious, not bad at all. That wobble can be the difference between a great day and a not so great day. Very simple. My bar stock on my OD was about 7.5. You can't really mitigate the wobble unless I were to pre-op it, meaning face it, rough turn it real slow, flip it over, and have something true and flat to hold on to. I didn't want to do that. Then I guess I could beat it with a hammer and indicate it in. Didn't want to do that either. So what I did was I just went with my turning tool and took one rough pass, very conservative on my feet and speed, to balance it out and true up some of that wobble. And that seemed to work just fine. And I guess I should have covered this at the beginning, but our material is 1045. Our surface footage that we're running on our tool is G96 S575. I'm running 575 surface feet on my rough tools. My first cuts I'm cutting in at feet of 0.0075, so I'm a little bit under 1/3 the nose radius. Now, once I end up truing up that face and truing up that OD slightly, I kick it up to between 10 and 12 per revolution. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm using a 2 nose radius. I should be able to feed 2/3 my nose radius. I want to keep this very conservative. We're making our rate, but the idea of having a catastrophic failure here to go a little bit faster, I don't want to take that chance. Going a little bit conservative on my feed and speed. I started out at about 400 SFM, feeding at 7. So instead of going completely balls to the wall and right away ripping it out, I've slowly been kicking that feed up and my surface footage up. It's a production job. We have to make a lot of these parts. We're in no rush to get to that optimal cycle time, to our optimal speeds and feeds. How often are they changing the tools? What tools are they changing? Roughers, finishers, and why are they changing them? Is it catastrophic failure where the tool's destroying, or is it a little bit premature wear from excessive heat, maybe not hot enough? Once we know that data and that information, now we have a plan of attack. When I was running it before, a lot of my chips, you can see here there's no heat in the chip at all. My tools were lasting for quite a while. Seeing my chip has such little heat, my inserts were lasting a while. That was my first indication, kick up that SFM, which I did and it worked. Now we're going to be kicking up our feed rate. We have good chip control, predictable tool life. And you could say, well, is it good tool life or is it bad? Good or bad tool life, that has to do with your application. If you're making one part, who cares? We want predictable tool life, where our inserts can fail and we have a good idea of when they're going to fail, whether how many parts we run or a set amount of time, and then change it before they get to that. So right now, before we go any further, I want to talk about my sub-spindle work holding, my jaws I made on the sub-spindle. There's two big questions, comments, criticisms, whatever that I get when people look at my sub-spindle jaws. I'm going to cover them right now. I want you to notice two things. The first is that my part is not sitting on the back of the face of my part is not sitting on the back of the jaw. Yeah, there we go. You see the light through. I'm not sitting on the back. Another thing I want you to notice is all these burrs here. I got burrs here. I got burrs there. All these burrs on the jaw. And I have a lot of people say, oh, how abhorrent. You're not deburring the jaws. How can your part be good? I'm machining this here. And then you can see I transfer on this and machine this diameter. I'm able to hold run out from this bore, which is over here, to this bore here. The best I've seen it so far has been 6/10, 0.0006 inches. My run out is perfect. So what does that tell you? These burrs, they don't matter, literally at all. The only way they would matter is if they were folded in to where the jaw meets the part, but they're not. I'm boring it out so the burrs go out. It does not affect my work holding at all. To be honest, I never deburr my jaws, and I never have problems with work holding. So here's some of our parts that are done now, and you can see there are no marks and gouges anywhere. Just a pallet full of beautiful parts. Another thing to cover real quick, PSI. The PSI we're running on the main side, I'm looking at is right around 375. On the sub side, I'm right about 220 PSI. Nothing big, nothing out of the ordinary, not too high, not too low. The highest I really have ever ran anything is at 400 PSI. The lowest I've ran it has been 50 or even a little bit less. Question, because I wonder about your guys' machines. What's the highest PSI do you run? I've heard some people go up to 800. I've never seen a machine that could go that high, but I'm sure it's out there. What's the highest and the lowest PSI you run on your chucking jobs? Now we will watch our transfer occur. Both turrets get out of the way, go to a safe tooling position or a safe pocket position. Sub-spindle moves up. And the reason I like to have those spindles spin is in case we forgot to blow off a chip, that will help it to fall down. That is our complete transfer. And if you were to pop an indicator on there, you'd see it 1,000 or better. Run out good. So now we're going to talk about tooling, and I'm only going to hold this part for a little bit because it's heavy. This is our finished part. We got that big through bore, and we have 1 and 2 counter bores in the back. Well, 1 or 2 counter bores. So this bore, the through, is plus or minus 10. These counter bores are plus or minus 1.001. And our outside diameter is plus or minus 10, as well as our overall length plus or minus 10. The reason I bring that up is when we're dealing with any part, for me, especially larger parts, my tolerance is going to determine my tools. Material removal, the material grade, material removal, and quantity of parts on that order is going to greatly determine what tooling I use, in addition to how tight the tolerances are. So on the OD, with it being plus or minus 10, I could probably get away with the same tool roughing and finishing if I had to make a few. But this order, we have to make several hundred. And my material came in 0.4 inches over the finished size. So 200 on one face, 200 on the other, and it came over about 400 thousandths on the OD. It's a lot of material to remove. I do not want to take a chance of scrapping a part and having any other issues, so I have a rougher and I have a finisher on my OD. 432, 431. Now what I did with the boring is a little bit different and a little bit cooler because my bore has that plus or minus 1. Here's my bore setup. Here's my rough bore. It's a CXMG insert, and you can see I've got the coolant pipe through the tool, so it's kind of a big help. Now, for the bore that's plus or minus 0.001 tolerance, I have a dedicated tool just for that. You can see here's the tool going to the main, here's the tool going to the sub. That one tool, the only job it has is to finish that diameter, finish that little step, break the edge, and get out. Because I want to make sure that that tool will last as long as possible and minimize any scrap. I'm not going to use that tool for anything other than that plus or minus 1 finished diameter. My rough bore here and my rough bore here are doing the brunt of the work. They're rough boring it, and then they're finishing that through bore It was a little bit stressful running through the chance of any type of collision. Obviously there was no collision, but on this job, if there was going to be any type of collision, it would be here. But what we did was engage the rough bores at the same time. And that's about it on the manufacturing side. All the hard work is done. We loaded the part into the jaws, laid out our job, touched everything through, ran it, and then we made a good part. But how do we know it's good? How do we know the part that we made is good? Especially with that run out. It's not like I could put it on a V-block and have an indicator hit it. I mean, this thing is 40, 50, 60 pounds. I can't just do that. How do I do it? I sure as heck can't guess. We have to inspect it. Let's talk about that. Here's how we have our CMM set up. My cousin Daniel programmed it. Set on these little standoffs or stilts. Start. And let the CMM do CMM stuff. Sweep that front bore. Set that, check that diameter and its position. Now it's going to go up and sweep the back bore. See if we can get a shot of that. Not really. There we go. Do that same thing. It's going to check that diameter in that position. So hey team, that sums up the video. Wanted to go over this one because we don't normally run parts this big. It's pretty cool. Whenever we run something new or something big like this, we always learn something a little bit different every time, which is what I love about our industry. Always something new, always something different, always something to learn. I hope that you guys liked the video. I got one question I want to ask. What's the biggest part that you have ran? On what machine? How much did it weigh? Was it fun or was it a headache and a nightmare? This is Luke with Crusader Machining signing out. If you like the video, give me a like, consider subbing to the channel, and if you can, share it with someone that you think can derive some value from this video. Check me out on my socials at Crusader Machining. Signing out, and we'll see you next time.